Thank you, Trevor, and welcome everyone to our Cartus webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today. Cartus has been sharing a series of webinars with various topics impacting our mobility industry, given how quickly the landscape has been changing. And a recording of this webinar, as well as the most recent ones that we've done, is located in our Cartus Content Hub. My name is Michelle Brescia, and it's my pleasure to join you today. I lead an account management team as well as our Global Center of Excellence here at Cartus. Our session today focuses on internship impacts and innovation due to the global disruption. And recently, Cartus did an informal pulse survey of our clients, our account management teams, our sales team, and some of our prospects, and that was led by our consulting team. And some of those key findings specific to internship programs were that the anticipated 2020 program impact would be about 30% had responded that they decided to go virtual with their 2020 intern programs. 27% of the respondents have canceled their internship programs in total. And 16% said that there had been no impact to their internship programs. We have seen some organizations opt for virtual internships, and you'll hear our panelists talk a little bit more about these, but that includes doing some networking and social activities via virtual options, virtual team buildings, Google Meets, Zoom chats, etc., which I think we've seen overall as organizations as we move into a more virtual environment. Myself personally, having managed virtual teams for quite some time, find that those face-to-face connections, like a video conference, really do make a difference in managing employees virtually. We've heard from interns as well that they are seeking managers who are engaged and active in their development. They want to talk to their managers on a weekly basis. And they're also very concerned about what their future opportunities look like if they don't have that connection with their manager. They want to be seen, right? I think as we all work virtually now, we want to be seen. We want to know that we're making an impact, and we want to feel valued. And it's more difficult to do that when you're not able to make those face-to-face regular connections. So having that opportunity to really manage the program virtually is a great opportunity. So our panelists are going to talk a little bit more about that today. We're very excited to present this information to you. But before I introduce our panel, I wanted to quickly highlight a few housekeeping items. We've found the best practice is if you're having any technical issues, please drop off and rejoin the webinar. That seems to be the quickest way to get you back in and get access there. This session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing in our hub, as I mentioned earlier. And all attendees on this call are in listen mode only. So we will be engaging with questions in our chat function. And the chat function and question area also has a voting feature, so you're able to vote on which questions you would like our panelists to answer. So the panel is going to be very engaging with their topics. If we're not able to get to all of your questions, please know that we will send out some follow-ups after the webinar to be sure that we've answered your questions. As it relates to CRP and GMS credit information, that will be available at the end of the webinar as well. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel of industry experts and kick off the discussion. Joining us today is Susie DiGilio. Susie's a senior talent acquisition specialist at Qualcomm on the campus recruiting team, and she has been with Qualcomm for 4 years and has 10 years experience in university recruiting. We've got joining us Veronica Dinkins, who is a senior director, a global director of account management with Cartus, and she's been with Cartus or been in the industry rather for 30 years, serving relocation and real estate industry, and has experience including supporting many of our Fortune 500 clients. Today, she manages a global team, including teams in the US, Singapore, and Beijing. We've got Kara Pesho joining us. Kara is the Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Global Mobility with National Corporate Housing, having 25 years in the corporate housing industry with 19 at National and has held many positions consisting of operational and sales leadership. And at this time, I'd like to turn the call over to our moderator for this session, Yola Harb, and she'll introduce herself and kick off our session. Thank you, Yola.
Thanks, Michelle. Yola Harb with Cartus. I am a Director of Business Development, and I'm going to be leading the panel discussion today. I'd like to kick off our discussion with Susie from Qualcomm. So Susie, tell us a little bit about Qualcomm's internship program in a typical year. How many interns do you bring on? And are they both international and US domestic?
For the US and Canada, we hire about 575 interns. And for our US internships, they're seasonal, starting in May and ending in September, depending on the intern's school schedule. And then our interns in Canada are hired year-round on a co-op program. And then we hire about 400 international interns, but those are handled by our local offices internationally.
Great. And what did Qualcomm decide to do this year with their internship program?
In April, we made the decision to move to a virtual internship program for all of our interns.
Any feedback so far from the interns, how that's going for them, and or even some of the managers that you're working with? What's been their experience so far?
So far, we've had a mostly positive feedback from everyone. Our first group of interns started on May 11th, so still getting into the swing of things. So far, everyone I've talked to is really excited to still have the opportunity. Obviously not the most ideal situation, but they're just happy to be here and happy to be able to still be participating in a program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Veronica, same question for you. Give us some insight into the scope of Microsoft internship program and their approach this year.
Yes, happy to share that, Yola. Much like Qualcomm, Microsoft made the decision in April to move to a virtual internship. And they were planning to host 4,000 interns globally. Their largest program is here in the US that includes both US domestic as well as international interns. And we were planning to have over 3,000 of them here in Redmond, Washington this summer. Microsoft does have year-long internships that aligns with the university calendars, although throughout the year they're much smaller scale. They do have other local subsidiary locations with internships across Europe, Canada, Mexico, China, and India. The way the program works at Microsoft is Global Mobility actually owns the relocation planning, the logistics, and the delivery, especially for their US-based program. And then they partner closely with the intern program leaders who fall within their global talent acquisition organization. And with the impact of COVID-19, Microsoft made the decision to do them virtually as they've held the health and safety of their employees, interns, and families really as the highest priority, much like many of our companies in doing that. They did have students who were in the middle of their internships as we saw many countries start adopting restrictions, and Microsoft supported those interns to return home and considered their internship fully complete, even though it may not have been the full 12 weeks. Additionally, many of the students who were scheduled to be here in the US but were not able to travel here, they worked with their subsidiary locations and were able to provide local offers for many of those international students who ended up going back home when their university adopted virtual learning or in many cases closed their campuses. Microsoft found it really important to provide a consistent global internship experience. Even though they were going to be virtual, they still retained us, Cartus, to play a key role in collaborating and consulting with the various program managers as they developed the alternate delivery and revise the relocation benefits that had originally been offered. Today, our consultants remain a resource to each intern to support them with having a positive experience. And we continue to manage the program expenses, allowances, and partner very closely with the program managers on logistics and any feedback or issues that come up. As we all know, in the age of social media and how many in their generation in particular are quick to share, this really lended to the reason of wanting to provide a global, consistent experience with doing virtual internships for all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Veronica. That's certainly, again, the consistency, right, of a program is so important. And again, as you said, with the access to social media, word gets around very quickly, especially when you look at the future, right, of talent and who interns really from when they graduate from college, the companies that they're looking and want to consider. So Kara, you actually get the opportunity to support many organizations' programs. What response are you seeing in the market as it relates to internships?
Well, firstly, thank you, Yola and Michelle, for having me join today's panel. Greatly appreciate it. And in response to your question, that effort of balancing, I think Veronica has spoken to it as well as Susie, but that effort of balancing social responsibility and that business continuity, the response has really been mixed. We've had some cancellations. We've had some programs that have extended and started in mid-June. Some are commencing in July. We've also seen, when we talk about that in-person program compared to the virtual, we are seeing about 75% of the programs that we've worked with year over year are going to virtual. And some of those virtual programs are actually still housing their interns as needed because they really want them to get that virtual experience and have a good virtual experience. Several of the programs have also changed their policies. They're going to 1 bedrooms and putting 1 person per bedroom. So when they have 2 bedrooms, instead of having 4, they're changing up that pairing policy and they'll have 2 people instead. We see some programs that are actually talking about going 4th and 1st quarter with their programs, doing more of a co-op as opposed to a summer internship. And then we still have some clients who have still not decided what to do.
Kara, you mentioned that some of the programs continued from an in-person perspective. Can you just give us some insight into the industries that decided to maintain that in-person internship?
Absolutely. It's really what you're looking at as your essential or your business critical companies, such as construction, manufacturing, lab type internships, anything that requires someone to be on site and have that on-site participation, they continued with those in-person internships, as well as companies on the front line that are manufacturing the PPE equipment, that personal protection equipment, and vaccines. Currently, we have 2 construction companies, both moving forward with their programs this summer. One of the programs has decided to go to all 1 bedrooms because 2 days a week, they're going to have their interns that are working from the apartment home, and 3 days they'll be on the job site. The other program we have, which is also construction, they're moving in this weekend. So that construction being an essential business, they're still moving forward with their projects.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kara. Susie, since Qualcomm has actually moved to a virtual program, so Kara talked about some of those in-person as well as virtual programs that companies have moved to, but we know Qualcomm has moved to that virtual program. What are you experiencing so far with the onboarding process?
For the onboarding, we were a little fortunate because we moved the whole onboarding process for full-time employees at the end of March, so we were able to learn a lot from what they had done. Some of the difficulties we did see were some of the cities that interns were currently located in, whether or not we could conduct business there. We did have some interns that decided to move back to their international homes, and we needed to onboard them locally there. I'd say our biggest issue we've had come up is just with shipping out IT bundles. But with 575 interns, I think that's to be expected. But so far, everything's been going pretty smoothly.
All right. And what would you say are the challenges, or do you anticipate any challenges due to the program being virtual as opposed to in person?
I think the biggest challenge is not having them on site. Obviously, they're missing that benefit of just being able to walk into their manager or mentor's office. Everything's going to need to be a little bit more planned out now. And they're missing out on building relationships with other interns in different groups. We are trying to create an environment where they can still build relationships, but it is just a little bit different.
Great. Any feedback from those interns, Susie, that have started in the past few weeks? Any feedback that you've gotten from them on how the program is going? Is there something else that they need in addition to what they're already receiving?
The ones I've talked to, and I've met with probably about 20 of them, everything seems to be going pretty well. They've only been here for less than 2 weeks, so I think as they start getting a little bit more comfortable with us, we'll start to hear a little bit more of that. But we are meeting with them on a regular basis to try to get that feedback from them as soon as possible to identify any issues that they're having and see how we can correct it quickly.
Thank you, Susie. For Microsoft, Veronica, what do the first few weeks look like?
Well, similar to what Susie indicated, with the full-time hire population, they had started doing virtual onboarding. So there was some practices in place to do that. Microsoft's on week 4. Their first intern class started on the 4th of May. And this week and last week were their largest start dates of the season. Microsoft was able to leverage their onboarding tools as well as the collaboration platform via Microsoft Teams. And the program managers really had to work closely across all their business orgs to adapt and develop a virtual model, which included really working with the hiring managers on not just working with their existing teams virtually, but to make it an engaging experience with the interns, something that many of us are all experiencing now as well during this pandemic period. I did speak with the U.S. program manager this week after their large welcome day classes, and similarly to what Susie had shared, getting the hardware packages out to everyone was a little bit challenging, but they all arrived on time. And they had probably the biggest challenge was the authentication, or making sure you could get logged into the corporate network. And the last 2 weeks, there were over 700 starts. But overall, she felt the process had been going really well. They've been able to connect each of the interns with their downstream manager. And she had a really optimistic outlook of how things were going with the programs. They're also looking at trying to, have the opportunity throughout, as it is very different, as we've talked about, of being able to walk down the hall or into an office, but seeking those areas where they can connect with one another. I've seen some creative changes where like a team meeting is actually happening in Minecraft, where they're playing characters in the game as they meet and learn to build teamwork with one another. They also have planned several virtual events that will also allow them to engage with the senior leaders at Microsoft. And I'm sure the same is true at Qualcomm and many other companies, but Microsoft really empowers their interns that they're a part of co-creating their own experience. And in the past, we've seen some really creative outcomes where they've coordinated their own volunteer opportunities, or last year they actually created their own musical that you can go search Microsoft Summer Intern on YouTube if you need a little uplifting experience to do that. And I'm sure we'll see something creative as they adopt virtual internship experience and, you know, how they can make the most of it. Echoing what Susie said, I think a lot of the interns at Microsoft are just so thankful to have been able to maintain keeping their internship when a lot of organizations canceled them together. So they're very appreciative of having that opportunity.
Veronica, I love the Minecraft idea. I think, you know, so many of our children would love to experience, right, an internship where they can play Minecraft. We've certainly seen many changes to the way that we do business as an industry. Kara, what changes have you seen in the temporary living industry as it relates to internships and really any type of corporate housing?
Great, thank you, Yola. With the summer intern programs, I mean, they really have been instrumental in our growth year over year. That is, you know, everybody gets prepared for that big bang in the summer, right? And then we manage everything with the intern programs, from procuring the inventory to the roommate pairing, to the on-site orientations that move in. And boy, has it changed with COVID. With COVID, we're seeing about a 50% reduction in lead volume and bookings overall, inclusive of intern programs. The loss of the intern in-person programs has greatly impacted our whole industry. You know, having said that, we are listening to our clients, and we do see that they want to stay with on-site in-person programs. They're considering going forward, not housing the interns together in the same bedrooms, as I talked about before. Our corporate clients are considering having intern programs year-round, as opposed to just in the summer, so they can retain that talent. That's what these programs are all about, right? Is being able to have that talent come in. They're looking for and allowing them to spread out their internships. They're having co-op programs, rotational programs, and some of the rotational programs that are happening, a few of our programs are extending the stays of the participants that are already in-house, and others are pausing the program and waiting for those states to open up. After opening up process is initiated, they will begin phasing in the rotations and have their associates return to work. The dates are moving based on each location's current conditions and how the states are opening up. I would say we're seeing more and more companies, and we'll expect to see more year-round co-op programs in an effort to not just focus on the talent available during the traditional 12-week intern program, but to focus on providing that year-round experience.
And Kara, what are some of the precautionary measures that your group has taken and put in place?
We made recommendations to all of our clients who have intern programs. We made the recommendations for the roommates not to share a bedroom. So that was one of the first things that we did. So the intern programs that continued through COVID booked their interns one person per bedroom. The cleanliness and the sanitation are as important as the social distancing. Therefore, we did abide by CDC cleaning guidelines. We also provided recommendations to the interns and shared best practices for roommate sharing and the social distancing piece. And we relied heavily, and still relying heavily, on the technology such as Zoom and FaceTime to allow for a more virtual communication prior to their move-in and during their stay.
Thank you, Kara. You know, I recently read an article from an intern's perspective and what their level of engagement needs are and what they're looking for in an internship. So Susie, back to you. Can you speak more to what your organization is doing to keep interns engaged and the development plan Qualcomm has put in place?
So we're still planning to host some of the events we were going to host on site. We'll be doing an executive speaker series with our senior leaders, various tech talks about emerging technologies within Qualcomm. We've also teamed up our interns into smaller groups, as I was saying, where they can meet regularly with their recruiters, as well as other interns on a more smaller scale. We're also hosting virtual yoga, and we're going to be doing a hackathon. And we did just reiterate to the managers and mentors how important it is for them to be communicating with their interns on a daily and weekly basis and setting up those meetings, especially given that we are in a remote internship now.
Veronica, anything that you'd like to add from the Microsoft side?
I mean, it really is those personal connections that remain, important. And I know that they're very focused on, having the smaller groups, collaborating amongst smaller teams, as well as those broader exposure opportunities across the organization. The other thing just that Microsoft did for those students who, were not able to do a virtual internship is there are some cases where they pushed out their start date to be in the fall term where calendars aligned, or even next summer in many cases. And there are also instances where graduation is pending. They extended full-time offers. So really looking for other ways to keep them engaged where they weren't able to actually join the virtual internship because of their location.
And Veronica, I know you and I actually connected on this topic, and we're sharing our college student stories. Your daughter just graduated college, and she is personally experiencing the internship impact. So I'd love if you could share her perspective.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, Yola. My daughter and her friends were really in various stages of, interviewing, considering, or accepting full-time offers or internships in March when their universities moved to virtual learning. Many of them closed their campus. My daughter actually had to move mid-semester out of the dorms. And as corporations started moving to work from home, the interview process really stalled and then came to a screeching halt, and has given them a very high degree of uncertainty, about their futures. My daughter graduated in April from school in Southern California, and she was actually planning to stay there as she's taking a gap year before heading to law school. And much to her dismay, because there were no career opportunities, and really she was looking for just about anything, she moved back to Seattle because her prospects for internships or offers really had stopped. The one thing that I will say about her and many in her class is she was determined to earn money. She wanted to cover her expenses, wanted to be independent, and not have to rely on her parents. So she started thinking about who is hiring, where can I earn that money to be able to do that. So within a week, she was hired, and she is one of those young people out driving the Amazon van and delivering packages. So while not her intended career path, she is gaining a new perspective and walking over 10 miles a day. Other recent graduates are having various experiences as well from those I've talked with, where some moved across the company to accept the first computer science offer that they were offered. A lot of engineering students actually have delayed starts with their companies where they had accepted full-time offers. And really they're concerned about when the job market reopens that they'll be competing with an experienced workforce when the hiring begins. She had two friends who are completing their junior years right now. Both of them actually had full-time summer internships and having two very different outcomes. One of them actually had her internship, or the company had planned to do virtual, contact her 3 days before she was supposed to start, indicating they were no longer going to be able to have a summer internship program. The other individual, her 12-week internship, they actually reduced to a 2-week virtual internship, and she was offered a full-time offer pending graduation. So from, the junior and senior perspective, it really seems as though they're having mixed reactions, with some nervousness about missing out on obtaining that important experience, being able to build their resume, and some pressure where they're feeling like they're behind now and stressed about really the economics of how are they going to earn money this summer to cover their expenses when they go back to school in the fall. Wasn't all, though, doom and gloom. One of them actually said, I'm okay with it being a 2-week internship because now I have one more summer where I can be a kid before I have to really, enter the adult world. And she's hoping to travel, and I too hope that she'll be able to have that experience. The spring semester or quarters and canceled graduations wasn't what any of us envisioned, but I really do see indicators of how resilient and innovative the Generation Z college students are. And they're looking at COVID-19 as a temporary roadblock to them pursuing their careers and anxiously awaiting to enter the corporate workforce. And I wanted to just share, a quote from Kathleen Hogan, who is Microsoft's Executive VP and Chief People Officer. And she recently shared in her blog regarding their internship program that the power of a growth mindset is that every obstacle is an opportunity to succeed. Adversity often creates some of the biggest leaps in innovation. And she predicts this year's summer interns will have a lasting influence on their program for years to come. So while many in that age group are feeling stress and anxiety, I think they also hope it's temporary and are positive about what the outlook looks like. And Yola, I know you too have a daughter who is a senior, so maybe you can share a little bit about how you've seen, her reaction to adversity.
Thanks, Veronica. I would say your comment about them being so resilient is it's huge. They really have this mindset of, we need to go out and figure out how we can make money. I would say my daughter got very creative. She actually decided that since she can't go out anywhere, that she's going to sell clothes on Poshmark. So we, like a lot of people in the US decided to clean out the closets and do everything, as we were in the lockdown. So she did that. She went through, the closets and some things that she was able to actually post and sell. So she's got some income coming in. But again, I'm sure not what they're certainly looking for. It's definitely alternatives, right, to what they would experience in a working environment, and the networking opportunity in their personal career paths, right, that would help them grow. So certainly great to see them, though, have that resiliency. Kara,
Yola,
I know, yes.
Can I just add in a comment
Yes.
quick? I had a discussion. I had a discussion with a client last week, and we were talking about just all of the media presence around this generation, right? And how the positioning of these folks, or the need for immediacy, the need for the entitlement type mentality. And one of the things we talked about was how we really feel like that's painting the wrong portrait of this group, and we see their resilience. We see now them hustling for different opportunities, and it's just really encouraging and refreshing, and makes you really pause and think about what you see in the media, simply because of what the actual reality is that this pandemic has brought forward. And so really wanted to just kind of call that out, because it's your stories alone demonstrate the resilience of these folks and what they're going through.
So true, Michelle. Thank you so much. I know, Kara, actually, you and your group get to personally speak to some of these interns. What are you hearing from them about how they feel that this may have impacted them?
Right. Yes, Yola, and we do. And everything everyone is saying is so spot on. With the unemployment, it's rising. We all know this. So for an intern, they're looking at it as being a part of an internship program is crucial, right, to their future career opportunities. Also, they want the experience of learning and being a part of that company culture. And yes, you can get that virtually, but being in person, we all know is that much better, right? The experience of working for an organization, and many interns, housing is a huge factor for them. So we hear from these interns, and we were actually able to go back to one of our clients and let them know what the interns were saying. And they decided to go ahead with the program and house these folks in their cities and provide housing to them, because it's so important to them to have that housing during the summer that's paid for. These interns want to make that impact on the organization. They want to be able to travel and grow and see what it's like to work on site. I think with some of our intern programs that we've hosted and we've managed, we've actually seen that increased job offer opportunities from 50 to 83% within a single year with one of our corporate clients. So it really showcases and shows the success rate of having a fully managed intern program on site.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kara. Just going to throw out a little reminder that if you have questions, please throw them out into the Q&A section. And in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to move over to the Q&A and make sure that we hit on all the items that you want to hear about or you have questions about. Based on that survey, Michelle had mentioned it early on in our webinar. Based on the survey we completed, we know a large number of internships were canceled this year. Susie, what are you hearing from your colleagues in other industries? How do you think this will impact actually next year's talent hire? I know Kara hit on it a little bit, but definitely would love to have your perspective on that.
So I think that the companies that decided to cancel their internship, this is going to negatively impact them for not even just next year, but the next couple of years. It's going to take them a while to build back up from this. Nobody was prepared for this to happen. And I believe that the students are going to look for companies that were able to work through this as a place that they're going to want to work. We don't know what next year brings. We don't know where we're going to be in the fall either. So I think seeing a company that can adapt to these sort of changes and the unknown, I think is going to prove to be beneficial for next year.
Great. And absolutely agree. I think there's so much agility, right, that's needed, and companies certainly have to adapt very quickly to how things are changing. I'm going to throw out the last question to Kara, a follow-up to two things that you touched on, talent and social responsibility. Can you just share some additional insights into how the decline of those in-person internships are potentially impacting the clients that you're working with as it relates to talent?
Right, Yola. Susie said it. Interns are going to be looking for those companies that are thinking outside of the box, that have figured out how to do this and still house them and still provide that in person despite COVID. Clients are really feeling like that importance of having an in-person internship, and they're looking for ways to still be able to host these programs. We're seeing some programs place an even higher value on in-person internships. Some of them that did cancel, they decided not to do the virtual internships because, they stated that the environment further illustrates that need for an in-person internship program to evaluate that talent on a person-to-person basis. That way they can be sure whether each individual fits into their culture. Having the in-person intern program is a critical component to their overall talent acquisition strategy. Even though the unemployment rate is rising, that war on talent is still extremely competitive. And when you asked about balancing social responsibilities and business continuity, there's those programs that are hands-on and need to have the interns on site, such as manufacturing companies that I mentioned earlier. They're ensuring they meet the standards of the CDC with providing the PPE and a safe environment to work. Some programs have gone from having 200 people that come in at the same time down to 20 people in-person internships, as well as putting one person per bedroom as opposed to 2 people per bedroom. As I said before, a lot of these programs did cancel, or some of them did go virtual. There's still some programs that are waiting to see what happens over the next month and looking to perhaps have co-op programs in the fall and first quarter. One thing above all, every client that we work with is 100% dedicated and committed to doing the right thing by the intern.
Thanks, Kara. Veronica, over to you before I jump into the Q&A. Anything you want to add from a talent side for Microsoft?
Yeah, like we all said, we don't really know exactly what the future is looking like, but Microsoft at this time is planning for next summer to hopefully have all of their personal internships and working on adapting or adjusting the recruiting process as they work with the universities. If they're not able to be there in the fall, which is a big recruiting period time, of working through what those virtual events might be, because there is a need for talent in doing that. And so they're strategizing right now on if they need to adapt to doing that, but fully committed to continue making internships and university hires a plan of their global talent acquisition.
Wonderful. Thanks, Veronica. I think what I'd like to do is move over to the Q&A so we have a few minutes to be able to touch on some of the questions. Veronica, you actually just talked about what Microsoft's plans are for next summer. Susie, for Qualcomm, are you already planning next summer's internships, virtual, in-person? What are the thoughts? And it's so hard because you're looking into a crystal ball, right, as far as what might be. But what is Qualcomm planning now?
As of right now, the plan is to have an in-person internship experience next summer, but it obviously depends on how the fall goes and how the spring goes. And now we know we're able to make changes to our program, so we'll be better prepared for that next year. But right now, our plan is to have an in-person internship next summer.
Okay. And one of the questions, and I know that both Veronica and Susie hit on it early on from a technology standpoint. One of the questions was, how are you managing getting technology to those interns, right? So Susie, can you just maybe touch base on some of those details around how you manage that internally, what you did, steps you took, something that for the listeners that could help them with best practices?
So we partnered very closely with our IT department. Right at the beginning, when we did make the decision to go virtual, we started to reach out to all of the interns to verify where they would be so that we could ship them all of the technology. We made sure to meet with the managers beforehand to have all of the laptops preloaded with the software needed. We also did provide a technology stipend to all of our interns so that they could be more productive working from home. That was for them to use for either a monitor or a keyboard. We're not tracking what they're buying with that, but it was just a little something to help them be a little bit more comfortable working from home.
Okay. Excellent. And anything to add, Veronica?
No, it was really the same thing, working with our facilities and security team to, one of the first key things really was they had to figure out where were the interns because of the university's closing. So that was a big part of the initial process to plan for the pre-boarding, was identifying where they were, and then the facilities team and IT team ensured that each intern received all the necessary hardware to allow them to be productive and working from their remote location.
Okay. Thanks, Veronica. Question for Kara. So, Kara, what do you see corporate housing companies doing to sanitize community spaces in their facilities?
To sanitize community spaces? Well, I will share with you, that's a really good question. I will share with you that what we're experiencing is that the communities are shutting down their community spaces. So the fitness centers, anything, theaters they may have on site, et cetera, are closed. As states start to open back up, they'll open those back up and they will abide by the CDC guidelines. But for now, we're seeing all those open spaces closed, like fitness centers, et cetera.
All right. And Kara, I'm going to stay with you just for the corporate housing side. Mm-hmm. And then I'll ask it of Susie as well. But how are you managing those cancellations that are coming in, partnering back with organizations who actually needed to cancel, right, and go virtual because of the COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a great question too. We really took it case by case. There are some, if they were 30-day stay, they did pay through the 30 days. There are some that were longer term leases that we were able to work with the properties and, provide a break lease policy or whatnot, because rents are still needing to be paid. There are some that we were able to work with that said, listen, I'm not bringing this in now, but we're looking to bring someone in the fall. Could we switch the apartment and not be responsible for it now and be responsible for it later, which we were able to provide them that opportunity. I am going to share with you, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. We wanted to do right by our clients, but we also need to be able to survive COVID as well, right? And we need to be able to be in business for our clients at a later date. The majority of our clients were appreciative, and anything we could do for them, they were happy about.
Excellent. And Susie, from the business side, the corporate side, how did you manage, right? Because all those interns, typically you're planning that months ahead of time. How did you manage those cancellations?
To be honest, I wasn't a part of those discussions. Our procurement team handled it with Cartus and our housing vendor. So I do not have a lot of the insight into how that was handled.
All right. Veronica, anything from the Microsoft side that you could give some info on?
Yeah, it's similar to what Kara shared already. If you can imagine 3,000 interns coming into one location, there were definitely commitments made to housing providers, hotels, universities. And so Microsoft supplier partners really worked together to try and, minimize the cost impact, but recognizing commitments were made. And it is a big community here. I think in a lot of other locations, they were able to cancel because the volume was not as large in doing that. But there definitely was, I would say, a sunk cost in regards to housing at that time. And the suppliers worked their best to minimize what those costs would be.
All right. One more question that's out there just regarding limited budgets that companies now have to work with. Susie, I'm going to come back to you from a Qualcomm perspective. What are some suggestions for companies who are working with a limited budget compared to previous years?
Well, I think a lot of the things that we had in our budget we're not able to do this year. So I think that helps with the limited budget. A lot of the things we are going to be doing, like hosting the tech talks and just meeting together on Microsoft Teams on a smaller group, those things don't really cost any money. So I think it actually is a little bit easier for companies to work with a smaller budget, since you're not having to feed them lunch for any of the talks or feed them dinner for the hackathons that they're going to be on site for. I think there's a lot more opportunities to get creative with the budget. All
right, and I'm going to stick with you, Susie, for this question. It's a three-parter, but let me break it up a little bit. Do you have a long-term plan for your incoming interns?
Like in sense of rolling them over, or?
I would say yes, from a talent, maybe next year perspective even. Are there discussions now as far as how you might be moving them into a full-time position?
That has not changed for us. The point of our internship program is to build a pipeline for new grad talent. So those plans have not shifted in evaluating them for a full-time position upon graduation.
Okay. And then I think it's the managing expectations as well. So we spoke about that in earlier discussion in the webinar, the expectations of the intern, the engagement that they're looking for. How are you managing those expectations internally? What is your leadership team doing, or the managers of these interns doing to help manage those intern expectations?
I think setting up the weekly one-on-ones, having the mentors check in with them, also having the recruiting team meet with them more regularly. We also send out surveys to the interns within the first couple of weeks to check in with them to see how everything's going, making sure that they know what project they're on so that we can identify if we need to jump in to speak with the manager. But as of right now, we're putting a lot of trust into the managers since we've been training them and discussing all the importance with them. And then we'll jump in where needed. But we're hoping that with those surveys and building the smaller groups that they'll feel more welcome to come to us.
So Susie, did you create like a formal documented plan at Qualcomm that all the managers were trained on and were able to implement?
We did a manager mentor training, and it was pretty much the same thing, but every recruiter handled it for each of their business units.
Okay. Veronica, anything you want to add to that Q&A discussion as far as incoming interns' expectation and how Microsoft is managing those expectations?
I mean, it's really what Susie said. I mean, Microsoft counts on their intern program to be the pipeline for future talent, and really did a lot of all of the same similar things. I don't personally have direct exposure to how they worked within their business orgs on managing those expectations, but I'm sure they were very similar and tightly aligned.
Yola, you're on mute.
There we go. We've been able to address all the Q&A questions, and I just wanted to thank everyone on the panel who joined us today. We're coming up to the end of the hour. I know that meetings always, back to back, so I'm going to give everybody about 5 minutes back in their time. But again, thank you, panelists, for your great insight today, and for everyone who's listening on our webinar today. Be on the lookout for our internship pulse survey. Those results and write-up will be going out as well shortly, where our clients had given us all that feedback. And look out for our next week's or our next webinar. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.